The Galactic Museum of Ancient Artifacts sat at the edge of civilized space, a monument to everything the universe had forgotten. I had been its curator for 73 cycles, and in that time, I had seen precisely 4 visitors. 4 in 73 cycles. So when the human walked through the plasma doors that morning, I nearly fell off my hover disk. "Welcome," I managed, my 3 eye stalks swiveling to focus on the creature. It was smaller than the holos suggested, covered in the standard-issue clothing humans seem to favor, some kind of blue leg coverings, and a shirt that read, "I survived Earth's gravitational pull, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." The human smiled, showing those unsettling bone-white teeth. "Thanks. Mind if I look around?" "Please," I gestured with 2 of my appendages. "Take all the time you need. We close in?" "Oh, never. We never close." The human laughed, a sharp barking sound that made my sensory nodes vibrate. "Slow day, huh?" "Slow millennium," I corrected. "I am Curator Vex, 9, of the Thornian species." "And you are?" "Marcus Webb." The human extended. "One of its appendages." I stared at it for a moment, before remembering the bizarre ritual they called a handshake. I wrapped one tentacle around it and shook, probably too vigorously, because the human winced. "So, what have you got here?" Marcus asked, pulling his hand back and flexing the fingers. I brightened, all 3 eyes widening with excitement. Finally, someone who cared. "We have the finest collection of pre-galactic artifacts in this entire sector. Items dating back before the formation of the Unified Council, before the Great Silence, before even the first convergence." Marcus whistled, a sound I had learned meant appreciation. "That old, huh? Show me the good stuff." I led him through the main hall, past the crystallized remains of the Vorthan Empire, past the quantum-locked cage containing the last words of the Eternals, past the viewing chamber where one could see the actual light from the birth of 3 different galaxies. Marcus looked politely interested in all of it, nodding and making appropriate sounds, but I could tell he was not truly impressed. Humans, I had read, were difficult to impress. They came from a death world where everything tried to kill them, so ancient artifacts probably seemed tame by comparison. Then we reached the weapons section. "Now this," I said, my voice taking on the rehearsed quality of a tour guide who had given this speech to exactly nobody for the past decade, "is where we keep the most dangerous relics. All of them are secured behind level 9 containment fields, naturally. That spear there belonged to the War Master of Krell, who used it to conquer 17 systems before someone finally poisoned his soup. The blade is made from collapsed star matter and can cut through anything except, apparently, political intrigue." Marcus chuckled, but his attention had already moved to the next case. "And this," I continued, following his gaze, "is perhaps our most mysterious piece. We call it the Void Blade, though that is merely a placeholder name. We have absolutely no idea what it actually islanded. The sword hung suspended in a containment field so powerful it hummed audibly, a bass note that you felt in your organs rather than heard. The weapon itself was unremarkable at first glance. Roughly 2 meters long, straight blade, simple crossguard, wrapped handle. But the metal, if it even was metal, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Looking at it too long made my eyes hurt, as if the blade existed slightly outside normal space-time. "Our dating equipment cannot get a solid read on it," I explained. "Every scan we run gives us a different result." The last one suggested it was older than the Andromeda Galaxy, which is, of course, impossible. Nothing survives that long. The previous scan said it was negative 3,000 years old, which makes even less sense. Marcus had gone very still, staring at the sword with an expression I could not quite read. Humans were difficult that way, their faces doing all sorts of gymnastics that could mean anything from joy to indigestion. "Where did you get it?" he asked quietly. "Found it floating in deep space, near the Veil Nebula. Just drifting," No ship, no debris, nothing. We picked it up 40 years ago. It has been here ever since. I paused, studying him. Why? Does it look familiar? Yeah, Marcus said slowly. Yeah, it does. I laughed, a gurgling sound from my third throat. Oh, come now. Unless you are several billion years old, I doubt you have seen this particular item before. Can I get closer? Absolutely not. The containment field is there for a reason. We tried to study it once, got 3 of our best scientists within a meter of it, and they all started speaking in languages that have not existed for eons. Took us weeks to deprogram them. One of them still occasionally shouts warnings about something called the consumption in the middle of staff meetings. Marcus nodded but did not look away from the sword. What if I told you I know exactly what that is? Then I would say you have an excellent imagination, Mr. Webb. I was humoring him, obviously. Humans were known for their creativity, often to the point of delusion. It is a graduation sword, Marcus said. From the Temporal Academy on Kepler 442b, I should know. I have one just like it at home. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I said. That is absurd. First of all, there is no such place as the Temporal Academy. Second, Kepler 442b is a barren rock in human space. Third, this sword predates your entire species by billions of years. And fourth, graduation sword sounds like something from a children's story. Can you lower the containment field? Marcus asked, ignoring my very reasonable objections. Certainly not. Did you not hear the part about the scientists losing their minds? They lost their minds because they did not know what they were doing. I do. He turned to look at me, and for the first time, I noticed something odd about his eyes. They were brown, normal enough for a human, but there was something behind them. Something that suggested vast depths of experience that should not fit inside such a short-lived creature. You are serious, I said, my voice flat with disbelief. Dead serious. Look, I get that this sounds crazy, but trust me on this. Lower the field, let me touch it, and I will explain everything. If I start speaking in tongues or whatever, you can blast me with your security systems. I assume you have security systems? We have a very angry cleaning robot that once cornered a thief for 3 hours until security arrived, I admitted. But that is beside the point. I cannot just let random visitors handle priceless artifacts. Vex, Marcus said, using my name with a familiarity that should have been annoying but somehow was not. How long have you been the curator here? 73 cycles, as I mentioned. And in all that time, have you ever figured out what this thing is? Well, no, but... And do you not want to know? Is that not the entire point of being a curator? Understanding the past? He had me there, the clever little mammal. I did want to know. It had been gnawing at me for decades, this impossible sword, with its impossible readings and its aura of wrongness that made even the most advanced scanning equipment give up in confusion. If you die, I am filing a very strongly worded complaint with the human embassy, I muttered, manipulating the controls with 3 appendages simultaneously. The containment field flickered, then died with a whine of disappointed electronics. The sword hung there for a moment, suspended by nothing, then began to fall. Marcus caught it, just reached out, casual as anything, and plucked it from the air like he was grabbing a dropped utensil. The moment his fingers wrapped around the handle, everything changed. The sword lit up, not with light, exactly, but with something that looked like light, if light had been mixed with raw mathematics and the concept of inevitability. Symbols flared along the blade, writing in a language that hurt to look at because it seemed to be in several dimensions at once. The air around Marcus rippled, and I could have sworn I saw, just for a moment, dozens of other versions of him standing in the same spot, each slightly different, each holding the same sword. Oh yeah, Marcus said, grinning as he gave the sword a few experimental swings. This is definitely from my graduating class. See this notch here? He pointed to a tiny imperfection near the guard. That is from the final exam. Had to cut through a temporal paradox without creating a branch timeline. Tricky stuff. My sensory nodes were tingling with alarm, confusion, and a growing suspicion that I had made a terrible mistake. Mr. Webb? What exactly are you? Human? He said cheerfully, still examining the sword. Just a regular guy from Earth who happened to get recruited by the Temporal Academy when I was 22. They have a whole program, very selective, only take people who show natural resistance to causality distortion. Apparently, humans are good at that. Something about our brains being so chaotic that adding a little time travel actually makes us more stable, if you can believe it. I cannot believe any of this, I said honestly. Time travel is impossible. Every species in the galaxy has tried, and every species has failed. The mathematics do not work. Causality cannot be violated. Causality cannot be violated in this universe, Marcus corrected. But there are others, lots of others. The Academy exists outside standard space-time, in a sort of pocket dimension where the normal rules are more like gentle suggestions. We study temporal mechanics, learn how to navigate the time stream without breaking everything, and then we graduate with these. He held up the sword. They are not just weapons. They are keys, tools, anchors. They help us move through time without getting lost. This is insane, I breathed. If what you are saying is true, then why is one of these swords here, in my museum, floating around like space debris? Marcus's smile faded a little. That is the question, is it not? These things do not just get lost. They are bonded to their owners, synced to their temporal signature. The only way this should be here is if the person who owned it died, and even then, it should have returned to the Academy. He turned the blade, studying the symbols. According to this, it belonged to someone named Kira Solis. She was 2 years ahead of me. Good student, top marks in paradox resolution. Was? I caught the past tense. The sword is here, and she is not, Marcus said grimly. That means something went very wrong, probably during a mission. We sometimes get sent out to fix temporal anomalies, prevent disasters, that sort of thing, dangerous work. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I should take this back to the Academy. They will want to know what happened to her. Absolutely not, I spluttered. That is museum property. It has been catalogued, documented, filed in triplicate. It is the property of the Temporal Academy, Marcus corrected gently. And more importantly, it might have clues about what happened to Kira. She deserves that much. Besides, he added with a slight smirk, I am pretty sure your museum acquisition forms do not have a clause for found property of time travelers. I wanted to argue, but he was right. Our paperwork was extensive, but it did not cover temporal mechanics. That seemed like an oversight now. Fine, I said, deflating. Take it. But I want answers. Real answers, not more of this cryptic nonsense. Deal, Marcus agreed. Let me get this back to the Academy, file a report, and I will come back and tell you everything. Well, everything I am allowed to tell you. Some stuff is classified for various temporal security reasons. He started to walk toward the exit, still carrying the sword, and I followed, my mind reeling. 73 cycles of quiet solitude, and then this absurdity. Mr. Webb, I called out, as he reached the plasma doors. How did you even know to come here? How did you know we had that sword? Marcus paused, turning back with that unsettling human smile. Oh, that is the fun part. I did not know. I was just touring the sector, being a tourist, and I happened to stop by. Pure coincidence. Or, he tilted his head thoughtfully, maybe not. Time is funny that way. Maybe I was always going to come here today. Maybe the sword wanted to be found. Maybe Kira left it here. knowing someone would eventually recognize it. Hard to say. That is deeply unsatisfying, I told him. Yeah, he agreed. Time travel tends to be. But hey, look at the bright side. You just had the most exciting day of your career, and I have not even told you about the thing we found in your asteroid belt yet. What thing in our asteroid belt? The ancient human colony ship from a timeline that no longer exists. But that is a story for another visit. He waved. See you soon, Vex. Thanks for being so understanding about all this. And then he was gone, walking out into the station corridor with a sword older than galaxies tucked under his arm like an umbrella, leaving me standing in my empty museum with more questions than I had ever had in my life. I looked at the empty containment field, still humming softly. I need a drink, I muttered to myself. Or possibly therapy. Maybe both. The angry cleaning robot beeped sympathetically from the corner. 3 days passed before Marcus returned, and in that time I did absolutely nothing productive. How could I? Every artifact in my museum suddenly felt inadequate. Sure, I had the crystallized heart of a dying star, but did it have temporal paradoxes attached? No. I had the actual crown of the first emperor, but could it navigate between timelines? Doubtful. I was reorganizing the forbidden texts section for the 8th time when Marcus walked back through the plasma doors, this time accompanied by someone else. She was human too, though older than Marcus by perhaps a decade or two. Her hair was silver, cut short, and practical, and she wore a jacket covered in patches that showed symbols I did not recognize. But what caught my attention were her eyes. They had the same depth as Marcus's, that sense of containing far more experience than any mortal being should possess. Vex, Marcus called out cheerfully. This is Director Yuki Tanaka from the Temporal Academy. Yuki, this is Curator Vex 9, the being who found Kira's sword. Technically, a salvage crew found it 40 years ago, I corrected, extending a tentacle in greeting. I simply had the questionable judgment to let your friend here touch it. Yuki shook my tentacle with a firm grip. We appreciate that questionable judgment. May we speak somewhere private? I led them to my office, a cramped space filled with data pads, half-finished cataloging reports, and a collection of coffee mugs from various species. Humans had introduced coffee to the galaxy 3 centuries ago, and it remained their most significant contribution to galactic civilization, in my opinion. So, I said once we were settled, me on my hover disk, them on chairs that were slightly too small for human proportions. What did you learn? Marcus and Yuki exchanged a glance, one of those meaningful looks that suggested entire conversations happening in silence. Kira is alive, Yuki said finally. Or, rather, she was alive. Or will be alive. Temporal grammar is complicated. I am already lost, I admitted. Join the club, Marcus muttered. Even after 5 years at the academy, this stuff gives me headaches. Yuki shot him a look, then turned back to me. When Marcus brought us the sword, we were able to trace its temporal signature. Every sword is connected to its owner, across time and space, like a quantum entanglement, but more so. We followed Kira's trail, and it led us to something we did not expect. She pulled out a small device, placed it on my desk, and activated it. A holographic image appeared, a planet, lush and green, orbiting a yellow Sunday. This is Earth, Yuki continued. But not the Earth, you know. This is Earth from a timeline that diverged approximately 200,000 years ago, during the early migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa. I leaned closer, my eye stalks focusing on different details. The continents were wrong, shaped differently. What caused the divergence? Kira did, Marcus said softly. By accident. She was on a routine observation mission, just supposed to watch and record, nothing else. But something went wrong. Her temporal anchor malfunctioned, and she got stuck, 200,000 years in the past, unable to return, unable to call for help. Oh, no, I whispered, understanding dawning. She lived there? For how long? 63 years, Yuki said. She integrated into a tribe of early humans, taught them things they should not have known yet. Fire-making techniques that were too advanced, basic agriculture, even some rudimentary metalworking. She could not help herself. She was trained to observe, but she was also human, and humans are terrible at just watching when they could be helping. The hologram shifted, showing archaeological sites, cave paintings, artifacts that looked suspiciously advanced for their supposed age. The timeline she created was beautiful, Yuki continued, her voice tinged with something like regret. Humanity developed faster, more peacefully. They skipped a lot of the violent phases, avoided some of the worst conflicts. By the time they reached the space age, they were more unified, more advanced than we ever were in our timeline. That sounds wonderful, I said, confused. Marcus said, Is that timeline leads to the heat death of the universe 3 billion years early. I blinked, all three eyes closing and opening in sequence. Excuse me? Kira's changes had ripple effects, Yuki explained. Small differences compounding over millennia. That version of humanity made different discoveries, developed different technologies. One of those technologies was an attempt to harness dark energy. It worked too well. They accidentally accelerated the universe's expansion, triggering a cascade that would eventually tear everything apart. Stars, planets, atoms, everything would just drift away from everything else, until nothing remained but cold, empty void. But that has not happened, I pointed out. We are still here. The universe is fine, relatively speaking. Because Kira fixed it, Marcus said. She figured out what was going to happen, saw the calculations, understood the consequences of her actions, so she made a choice. She used her sword, the one you had in your museum, to sever herself from that timeline completely. I do not understand, I admitted. Yuki leaned forward. Imagine you are a character in a book, and you realize the story you are in leads to a terrible ending. So you tear yourself out of the pages and throw yourself into a different book entirely. That is what Kira did. She removed herself from that timeline so completely that it ceased to exist. The universe, reality itself, simply rejected that entire branch of possibility because its cause, Kira's interference, had been erased. But if she erased herself, I said slowly, then why do you remember her? Why does the sword exist? Because she did it smartly, Marcus said with clear admiration. She did not erase herself from our timeline, just from that one. She anchored herself to the sword, used it as a lifeboat while she cut away the poisoned timeline. Then, she drifted, sword and all, until she found a safe place to land. Your museum, Yuki added. Or rather, this sector of space. The sword arrived here 40 years ago, you said? Yes, floating near the Veil Nebula. That matches our calculations. Kira must have emerged from the temporal stream at that point, separated from her sword as part of the process. The sword drifted one way, she drifted another. So, where is she now? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Marcus grinned. Want to meet her? The station's medical wing was quiet at this hour, most of the staff on break. Yuki led us to a private room where an elderly woman lay sleeping, her breathing steady and peaceful. Kira Solis? Yuki said softly. Age 94, standard human years. She has been living on this station for the past 40 years, under the name Mira Stone. Works in the botanical gardens, grows the most amazing tomatoes according to the other residents. I stared at the sleeping woman, my mind struggling to process this. She has been here? This entire time? Living a normal life? She does not remember, Marcus explained. Memories, identity, sometimes even their sense of self. Kira saved the universe, but she lost who she was in the process. Mira Stone knows she came from somewhere else, knows she has dreams about impossible things, but the details are gone. Does she know about the sword? I asked. Not consciously, Yuki said. But I suspect some part of her did. Why else would the sword end up at the one museum in this sector? Why would it stay here? Waiting? Maybe she was hoping someone would find it, would piece together the story. So, what happens now? I looked at the two time travelers. Do you restore her memories? Take her back to the academy? Yuki shook her head. We cannot restore what was deliberately erased. And as for the academy, well, that is her choice to make. As if on cue, the elderly woman's eyes opened. They were cloudy with age, but still sharp, still intelligent. I know you, she said, looking at Marcus. Then, at Yuki. I know both of you. From the dreams. Hello, Kira, Yuki said gently. We have something that belongs to you. Marcus stepped forward, presenting the sword. It looked different now, I realized. The symbols along the blade were dimmer. The sense of wrongness faded. Mira, or Kira, or whoever she was now, reached out with trembling hands and touched the blade. Nothing dramatic happened, no light show, no temporal distortions, but tears began rolling down her cheeks. I saved them, she whispered. Didn't I? I saved everyone. You did, Marcus confirmed. You saved the entire universe, and then you disappeared so thoroughly that almost nobody knew. But we know now. The Academy knows. You are a hero, Kira. Mira, she corrected softly. I am Mira now. Kira is someone I used to be. In a dream I can barely remember. But I am glad she did what she did. I am glad I did what I did, even if I cannot quite recall doing it. You can keep the sword, Yuki offered. It is yours, after all. Mira smiled, a gentle expression full of peace. No, give it to someone who can use it. Someone who might need to make the hard choices like I did. I am done with all that. I have my tomatoes, my quiet life, my little corner of the universe. That is enough. She paused, then looked at me with those knowing eyes. You are the curator, yes? The one who kept it safe all these years? I am, I confirmed. Thank you, she said simply. For being there when the universe needed someone to hold on to an impossible thing, that is more important than you know. We left her there, peaceful in her hospital bed, already drifting back to sleep. The sword went back to the academy with Marcus and Yuki, where it would be studied, honored, and eventually given to another graduate who might need it. I returned to my museum, to my empty halls and priceless artifacts. But something had changed. I looked at my collection differently now. These were not just old things gathering dust. They were pieces of stories, fragments of lives, lived, and choices made. That crown had belonged to someone who built an empire. That spear had ended a war. That quantum-locked phrase had been someone's last words, important enough to preserve forever. And somewhere in this vast museum of forgotten things, there might be more stories waiting to be discovered. I started cataloging everything again, properly this time, with notes about provenance and history and the beings who had once used these objects. It would take years, maybe decades. But I had time. 3 weeks later, I got my 5th visitor, a young Vrillian researcher interested in pre-galactic trading routes. I showed her the navigation crystals we had, told her the story of the merchant fleet that had used them, explained how they had mapped the stars before modern technology made it easy. She listened, fascinated, asked questions, took notes. As she was leaving, she paused. You really love this stuff, don't you? I do, I admitted. Every object here is a small piece of something larger, something important. They deserve to be remembered. She smiled, her scales shifting to a pleased purple color. I will come back. Maybe bring some colleagues. This place is special. After she left, I looked around my museum again. It was still quiet, still empty most of the time. But now I understood something important. It was not about how many visitors came through those doors. It was about being here when the right visitor arrived, when someone needed to understand the past, when a story needed to be told. Marcus visited occasionally, always with tales of temporal adventures that made my sensory nodes ache with impossibility. Yuki came once, bringing a formal commendation from the Academy, thanking me for my role in preserving an important artifact. And Mira, formerly Kira, continued tending her tomatoes in the botanical gardens, sometimes stopping by to look at the empty space where her sword had hung. She never said anything, just stood there for a few minutes before wandering off again, humming tunes from timelines that no longer existed. My museum remained the least visited attraction in the sector. I was fine with that now, because I had learned something important from that impossible sword and the woman who had wielded it. Sometimes the most significant things are the ones nobody notices, the quiet sacrifices, the forgotten heroes, the artifacts that wait patiently for someone to understand their story. I was not just a curator of objects anymore. I was a keeper of stories, a guardian of memories, a bridge between the past and the present. And if that meant spending most of my time alone with my collection, talking to artifacts and the occasional cleaning robot, well, that was all right. Some things were worth preserving, even if nobody was watching. Especially if nobody was watching. The universe had been saved by someone willing to erase herself to protect others. That kind of sacrifice deserved to be remembered, even if only in the mind of one tentacled curator in a forgotten museum at the edge of civilized space. I went back to my cataloging, humming one of Mira's impossible tunes, surrounded by wonders that few would ever see. And I was content.